Welcome our viewers and listeners joining us from different parts of the world. My name is David Chikwaza, and this is Africa in Perspective Conversations with David. Today my guest is joining me all the way from South Africa, Bloemfontein. His name is Professor Twala, and he is Associate Professor, Department of History and Vice Dean Faculty of the Humanities at the University of the Free State, Bloemfontein campus. He holds a PhD history from the University of the Free State. Twala has substantial publication record on the history of the liberation movement with special reference to the ANC. He is the author of 8 chapters, co-authored 2 in The Road to Democracy in South Africa, Volume 4, 1970 to 1990, and The Road to Democracy South Africa, Volume 6, 1990 to 1996, published in 2010, 2013, 2019 respectively. He is recipient of the Mellon Foundation grant and the National Institute of Humanities and Social Sciences grant. He is finalizing a book manuscript entitled The 12 Lives for Liberation, the Role of the 12 Disciples of Nelson Mandela in South Africa's Struggle for Liberation. He has the following visiting fellowships: Harvard University, USA, Kwame Nkrumah's Institute at the University of Ghana, Accra, and the University of California, Los Angeles, USA. Ladies and gentlemen, our viewers and listeners, the topic under discussion today is the South African crisis, a critical analysis of the politics of the ANC in post-colonial South Africa, and the arrest of Jacob Zuma and the subsequent unrest. Before we begin our conversation today, as is our custom, let me give our guest an opportunity to give us his opening remarks. Prof, welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chikwaza. I am glad and happy to be part of this conversation dealing with the history or contemporary history of South Africa. Thank you for hosting me.
Lovely. Prof, how's where you are? How's Bloemfontein today?
No, Bloemfontein, little bit chilly, but the weather is improving. And fortunately, in Bloemfontein or in the Free State province, we didn't have any protests pertaining to what happened to the revolt of 2 weeks ago in South Africa. We are stable, fortunately, for now.
Which is a good thing. How about the pandemic? How are you guys coping with the pandemic?
Relatively coping as the Free Staters, and the numbers are not as bad as we had anticipated. But unfortunately, we are still losing some lives, as in the other parts of the country, but we are coping, and the situation is stabilizing.
Very good to hear that. Well, Prof, I have a couple of questions for you. Some would like to argue that the formation of the EFF attests to the failure by post-independence ANC to stick to its original ideological underpinnings. As a professor of history, what was the ideological state of the ANC pre-independence? And would you say it is the same today, considering the revolutionary struggle credentials of Cyril Ramaphosa as the current president of South Africa and the ideological contradictions prevailing in the party?
Thank you very much for that question, Mr. David. Obviously, ideology in political circles or in political parties will ever change. It can't be stuck to the past. When the ANC was formed in 1912, in January 1912, fortunately, here in Bloemfontein, and the ideological underpinning of the ANC was totally different from the ANC that we have today, because of the dynamics of the political landscape during the period of the formation until to date. Therefore, we can't be pinning down the ANC to the former ideological underpinnings that of African nationalism and think that all for the past 100 years, it will continue like that. It can't be. Therefore, there was that evolution of the ideology of the ANC from being African nationalism and leading to the 1950s, the breaking away from the ANC by people like Robert Sobukwe to the formation of the PAC. And that shows that there was a shift from the ANC, and then with the involvement also of the communists within the African National Congress led to the shift in 1959 and to the formation of the Pan-Africanist Congress under the leadership of people like Zephania Mutopeng and Robert Sobukwe, Josias Matsunya. And then that shift and then that split was an indication of an ideological shift, because the PAC members would argue and say the ANC was more encompassing the white people, and then that left the whole aspect of African nationalism and of being Pan-Africanism. Therefore, they were against the involvement of the whites in the struggle for liberation, because their argument was to say no white person who is an oppressor at the same time wanted to be a liberator. Therefore, that was an ideological shift from those people. And that shift also continued until in the early 1990s with the formation of the United Democratic Movement, and subsequently the formation of the Economic Freedom Front under the leadership of Julius Malema. And then that shift also has to do with ideology, and it also has to do with the impact of the politicization of the landscape in South Africa. One can also mention the question of the land in South Africa. Whether do we want people to have their land, the return of the land without expropriation or with compensation, something like that. Therefore, it is ideally notable that there is a lot of shift in terms of the political landscape within the ANC. And also, people are looking at Cyril Ramaphosa from the EFF perspective, that he is a brainchild of the capitalists. And that is why they are challenging that there is this white monopoly capitalism in South Africa.
Thank you, Prof. I'll just proceed to the second question, which may also be connected to the first, which is that there are those who strongly feel that the arrest of former President Jacob Zuma is strongly entrenched in the politics that is obtaining in the ANC. In fact, there are those who would like to trace it further to monopoly capitalists, like you have already pointed out to. In your view, in what context should we understand the arrest? Was it purely an issue of rule of law, or there is more than what meets the eye?
Mr. David, politics and in history, there are two sides to every coin.
Yes.
It depends on where you are standing, looking at the sides. The arrest of former President Jacob Zuma, it has an impact politically, although other people might argue that it is a legal matter. But before it became a legal matter, there were some politicization of the whole aspect of the arrest. And perhaps we need to also to understand and to think about the whole factionalism that is happening within the ANC. 12 years ago, I published an article about factionalism within the ANC. And I had anticipated what is happening today, but I saw it 12 years ago.
Wow.
And the factionalist politics within the ANC, I think and argue that they are playing its part in all levels of government. And whether it is the legal sphere or the administrative sphere or the political sphere, but that factionalism is rearing its ugly head because people are in factional positions and factional groups, and there is no denial about that. Therefore, even if former President Zuma went against the law, or legally so, by not adhering to the Concord decision, but one might also argue and say, why a 15-month imprisonment?
Mm-hmm.
Was it not that the ultimate one? And why not self-arrest, house arrest, and impose him into house arrest, a person at the age of 80 years? And then other people might also argue and say, why should he be treated differently?
Mm-hmm.
and be imposed under house arrest because of age? And how many people who are of the same age are in prisons and not given that latitude of having a house arrest? And those are the dynamics that are playing to the fore in terms of the politicization of the whole legal system in South Africa, as well as the whole chain of people who wanted to use that in order to transcend politically. And that is the problem that we are experiencing as South Africans today. But we also need to contextualize this and historicize this. That yes, we might be having the former head of state being in prison, but the whole question of factionalism within the ANC, it has been there since time immemorial. It is not something that is new. You'll recall that in 1969, there was this Morogoro conference, which took place in Tanzania, in Morogoro. And there was the Chris Hani Memorandum, and then whereby Chris Hani and some of the like-minded people were challenging the leadership of the ANC. And some of the people were expelled from the ANC because of that. And then in the 1970s, also that also happened within the ranks of the ANC. It happened with the likes of Julius Malema. Therefore, it is not something that is new, but as to how people are internalizing it within the ranks of the ANC, it is what is eating the ANC as this cancer within the former liberation movement. Unfortunately, it is eating it time and again.
Okay. Of particular interest is the issue about the capitalist. To what extent do you feel, Ramaphosa is really the expression of the interest of the capitalist in this whole debacle, in this whole situation?
We needed to have evidence about that. And remember, if you are consulting everybody and your political enemies might see it differently because you are not consulting the other source. But there are rumors and there are people who are claiming that whatever he is doing as the head of state, he is taking instructions from the capitalist. And then we need also to verify that. And then one other way of us verifying it is to also to check the campaign strategy of Ramaphosa and then who was sponsoring it. I am one of the believers to say that that information should come to the fore in order for people to know what happened and who sponsored it. And if that information can come to the fore, perhaps it can clear some of these rumors and perceptions from people that he is coming and then getting some instructions from the capitalist. And that will clear his name and will clear the country's top #1 citizen in terms of being sponsored by whoever. Perhaps one also need to ask a question as to say, what is wrong being sponsored by other people? And that is the question, $1 million question that we should be answering today. And what is wrong with that? And if there is something wrong with that, then the next question would be, what is the influence and the impact of the sponsors to the running of the country itself? If there is a correlation between the two, then it is problematic. By virtue of being sponsored, therefore you are taking instructions from such people, then it is problematic. But if people are sponsoring you, but they are not influencing you politically on how to run the country, then it's a different ballgame. Therefore, we need also to juxtapose the two in order to understand the dynamics and the underlying dynamics between sponsorship as well as the running of the country. And because if we are going to perpetuate that, then we are going back again to the times of former President Zuma, whereby people would argue and say the Guptas were running the country. Therefore, such things should be cleared out in order for the country to stabilize and to move forward in terms of stabilizing and in terms of governance and also compliance in governance, which is also key.
Definitely. Well, in light of your above answers, how then do you construe the subsequent unrest in KZN and relatively in other parts of the country? Was it just about the arrests, or there is more to it? Because there are those who feel it was sort of an avenue, event that brought out to the fore some of the underlying issues that have always been entrenched within the South African society, issues to do with inequality, issues to do with unemployment, and also some would like to argue it was also an opportunity for those that have always held a case against the state.
Definitely, this is a multifaceted kind of an arena. You can look at it from the social ills that the country has had in the past, dating back to the apartheid era and to the post-apartheid period. The whole question you alluded to, the question of unemployment, the question of poverty, those are sticking questions that would make people to be disgruntled and would make people to want to vent if there are opportunities to their disposal in order to challenge the ruling party. It is also important that we need also to contextualize this and say nobody is born violent. Mm-hmm. Nobody is inherently a violent person. Mm-hmm. Perhaps the country should have an open dialogue and ask not the difficult questions, but critical questions in as far as why the country experienced this heightened kind of protests. Mm-hmm. We have had the protests in the past, mm-hmm. but not at this magnitude. Mm-hmm. And why now? Why in the government, which is purported to be the government of the people, voted by the majority of the people, why wouldn't people protect the resources of the state, of the government? And why would people go against and embark on a looting that we saw last time? Mm-hmm. We cannot rule a question of political opportunism here. Mm-hmm. Propelled, one, by the whole question of factionalism within the ruling party, two, by the advantage that is taken by the opposition parties and other parties in terms of saying, look at what the ANC government is doing to people, and look at how people are now rebelling against the ANC's government. Therefore, it is a two-dimensional kind of a way of looking at it. But I think there is an element of opportunism, mm-hmm. and there is an element of thuggerism also within the whole process. Because if you are hungry, for an example, David, mm-hmm. why would you steal a mattress? Mm-hmm. Why would you steal a fridge? Mm-hmm. Because even after stealing a fridge, you are still going to be hungry. Mm-hmm. And then if you are hungry and unemployed, if you had stolen a fridge, you are still not going to have that money to buy electricity and to plug that fridge in order for that fridge to operate. Mm-hmm. Therefore, we need also to look at that why, if people are saying to be hungry, why not only looting food? I'm not condoning the question of looting, mm-hmm. but I'm just asking myself such questions. Mm-hmm. And then also the whole question of the security clusters in South Africa, and speaking in tongues, not in one voice about mm-hmm. what happened actually. And it is also a cause for concern that you've got these ministers from the one stable, from the ANC, but they are speaking in tongues. Therefore, that is also one way and the evidence of this factionalism exhibiting itself to the fore for everybody to see that something is not right. And then until such time that the president is dealing with this decisively so, and then dealing with the ministers speaking in tongues, and then I think the country would move forward. Yes, relatively now, there is stability, but the biggest question and $1 million question is, for how long are we going to have this stability? Because the court cases from the former president are still going to continue, and the court cases from other people who are said to be related or to be in cahoot with the former president are still going to continue, then we might have seen the first part of the protest, and many more are still going to come in the latter future.
Professor, isn't it interesting that there were reports of members of the security force that were also involved? And I think there are also reports circulating about even members of the minority white community also taking part in this whole thing, in this whole looting and grabbing of things.
This myopic view of saying only Black people are looters, it is not true.
Mm-hmm.
It is not true, because people would take advantage of chaos. And some people thrive when there is chaos.
Mm-hmm.
And some people excel with a thuggerish kind of behavior when there is chaos. Because in a chaotic situation, it is difficult to pinpoint who is involved and who is not involved. Mm-hmm. Therefore, we cannot rule that out, that some of the security forces were involved, but we needed to have evidence to prove that. We cannot also rule out that some of the white people were also involved in looting. Mm-hmm. But remember, it depends on who is capturing that footage. Mm-hmm. And then what is the motive behind the capturing of that footage? I've seen some footages of white people carrying some looted stuff. Mm-hmm. You can't say then we turn a blind eye over that. They are as guilty as any other person, whether Black, Indian, colored, but who are looting. Therefore, they are as guilty as such. Therefore, we cannot turn a blind eye and say only Black people should be accused of looting. It was looting. Looting is looting. Looting does not know any color. Mm-hmm. Therefore, if a person is looting, we shouldn't even say, from your question, we shouldn't even say, or we shouldn't even apportioning the color to it. We shouldn't be saying Black or white, but we should say South Africans looted.
Yes, South Africans looted. Well, moving to the next question, some people have argued that a former president should not be arrested under what circumstances in the interest of security and stability. Do you share the same view, and why?
It is very difficult because South Africa is a constitutional country. Mm-hmm. And constitutional democracy in South Africa. Mm-hmm. We all uphold the constitution of the country. And it is important for every citizen of the country to adhere to that. And irrespective of your position in community or in society. But it is important that we respect the rule of law. It is important that we uphold the constitution, because the very same constitution was adopted in 1996, and then when the ANC was in government. Therefore, if we are going to have people from the ruling party who are going against that constitution, then it is problematic. Then another challenge, if we are using the very same constitution also to score political goals, then it is another challenge. It is another problem. Therefore, the constitution should not be used for scoring political goals, but the constitution should be used to protect everybody in South Africa. And that should be cascaded down to the legal fraternity, to the courts, that they should not be partisan, but they should uphold the law of the country and uphold what the constitution says it must be in accordance with the law. And that is what is important. Then people can see it differently and say, yes, the former president should not have been arrested because of 1, 2, 3. Yes, we need to also understand their way of thinking. But at the same time, while we are doing that, we need to respect the rule of law and to respect the constitution of the country. Because if you don't do that, and then how many people are going to take cue from that and say, because the former president was not taken to task because of that, then why me? Then we need to use the same comb to comb everybody. Because if you use different brushes, then you are going to experience problems.
Okay, I was following comments, especially from those that belong to the legal fraternity. And there are some that were arguing that the law must be silent on political questions. Like, for example, this issue of President Jacob Zuma, some would like to look at it as a political question beyond legal. How do you respond to the view that the law must be silent on political questions?
Unfortunately, Mr. Chikwaza, I am not a legal guru.
Yes.
It will be difficult to put myself in the shoes of the legal experts, because they would know why are they arguing from that level. But my understanding is, even if there is the politicization of everything, you need to go to the court and clear your name. And you don't clear your name outside the court, because the court is there in order to provide you a platform to clear your name. If you feel that this is not a legal matter, but it is a political matter, but you need to go and state that in front of the court. But if you refuse to do that, then the court will continue with their legal avenues to charge you because you didn't want to clear your name in front of the court. Therefore, as to whether the court is politicized or whether the court or the legal fraternity is factionalized, and that is another topic and debate to be argued. But if you are charged and there are allegations against you, and then you are expected to come in front of the court and to clear your name, I think a prudent way and the right way to do is to go to the court and clear it, and then challenge the outcome of the court legally, so rather than abstaining from doing so, because the court will also inflict the court proceedings upon you.
Upon you, definitely. Do you feel that the problem was with taking the man to prison and slapping him with 15 months, or the problem is maybe the arrest? I don't know. What is your view regarding that?
I think the intelligence of the country should have picked that up as the aftermath of the arrest.
Yes.
Because it was not a closed book that people were saying, hands off former President Zuma. Should former President Zuma be arrested, there will be chaos in the country. I wanted to put the blame squarely on the security cluster here and say, with the country's intelligence, they should have picked that up.
Definitely.
And then they picked also the hot spots, which provinces would go in doing that. It was not something that just happened spontaneously. A week before the arrest of former President Zuma, there was a meeting at India, and people conversed there in their numbers. Everybody could see that something was brewing. For the positive to former president or for the negative to the country, but something was brewing. But to be honest, the security forces were not hands-on in terms of dealing with that. Therefore, those were the signs and the signposts showing that should the former president be arrested, then we are going to have chaos.
Yes.
And then that is exactly what happened.
Yeah.
Therefore, we cannot sit here today and say it is because of the arrest that this led to this, but the security cluster knew about that kind of a situation that was brewing within the country. Yeah. And the question that we need to ask ourselves and to need to ask the security cluster is that what did they do in order to prevent that, in order to arrest the situation, not the situation to move to that extent. And then we cannot blame former President Zuma and said former President Zuma because of his arrest, therefore led to the chaos that we experienced. I think the arrest was a climax of the brewing discontent from the people on the ground because of poverty, because of unemployment, and because of other related socio-economic challenges that the country is facing. Therefore, we cannot say, even if former President Zuma was not arrested, chaos was still going to come to South Africa because of the underlying challenges and problems that the country has been experiencing over the past few years.
Definitely. Thank you so much for making that clear. Before I let you go, Prof, what recommendations would you like to give to African governments regarding situations where they might have to send a former president to prison for crimes committed during tenure in public office?
My take, Mr. David, is that if you are found guilty, you are found guilty. If you want to challenge that, you must also use the very same legal avenues to challenge whatever verdict is given to you. Irrespective of whether a person is a former president or a former minister or whoever, and a person should go to the courts and clear his name. And if there are politicizations in terms of the whole question of the proceedings of the court, the person should also challenge that. And that is important. And to our African brothers and sisters, I would say, let us stick to the mandate that is given to us by our constituencies, by people who voted us into power. Because why, Mr. David, would people or the legal fraternity of your country wanted to put you in jail if earnestly and honestly you worked according to the mandate that you are given by your people? Unless something had gone wrong, and then there is this huge politicization of all these legal fraternities, then that is a problem. But I still want to believe that Africa, it is best situated in order to show the whole world that Africans can govern. And Africans, even prior a democracy, people could govern themselves. And as to how people look at governance, it depends on whether they are wearing the Western spectacles to look at governance, or they are wearing the African spectacles of looking at governance. And that is $1 million question. We don't need to be workshopped by the West in terms of how to govern Africa.
Yes.
We don't need to take instructions from the West in order to govern Africa. Africa can be governed by the Africans themselves. And then I want to believe also that we need African solutions for our African problems. Because some of the problems that we are battling with today in terms of unemployment, uneducated, illiterate citizenry, some of these problems, although some people might not want to hear this, they are coming from as back as the colonialization and the apartheid era. And those are the impact that we are having today. And then in dealing with that, we need to be bold enough and to develop our thick skin and challenge all these challenges that are confronting our African in an African way. We don't need to Google the Western way of governance because we can govern as Africans. Africans should just be clear and tell themselves that they've got all the skills, they've got all the expertise of governance, as long as it is for the betterment of the African people, as long as it is for the betterment of Africa as a continent, and that will take us too far. And rather than jostling with politics and politicization of the positions and also politicization of governance, we need to professionalize governance and then and move forward. And that is important for us as Africans. And we do have other African leaders who are leading the pack in this regard. You can look at Rwanda, what is happening in Rwanda. And it is important that we learn from others. And then we only take what is good from them and leave what is bad, and then leave what is bad to them and to take what is good from them. And that is important. And that should be the guiding principle of Africans. And in all spheres, whether we are in education, in economy, in politics, we must up our game and roll up our sleeves and be proud of being Africans, because we are Africans.
Thank you so much for those recommendations and those insights. I could also add to, personally, the lesson that I've also picked up on behalf of those governments is next time they find themselves in such a situation, they must also be in a position to defend, vital things. For example, you mentioned the issue about the arrest of President Jacob Zuma, and you mentioned that the security sector failed to pick up. They failed to pick up and anticipate what would follow, because already the indicators were there of what was going to follow, but yet they were found unprepared, which is surprising. So I think one lesson that I can also fish up from what you say there is, if a government is to find itself in such a situation, then their intelligence should be able to pick it up and make the necessary preparations.
Yeah, I think, David, it is a two-way thing. Mm-hmm. It's either they failed to pick that up, or it's either they picked that up, but they undermined the magnitude of what they picked up.
Okay.
There are two scenarios here. Mm-hmm. And because it is a security matter, mm-hmm. it is an intelligence matter, mm-hmm. only those who are in that kind of a circle will understand. Mm-hmm. Because if you are asking such questions, they'll say, but remember, it is an intelligence matter. We cannot disclose mm-hmm. whether we are aware of the situation and then we undermine it, or whether we are not aware of the situation. Mm-hmm. But either between the two, something might have happened. It's either they were aware and then they did not react or act, mm-hmm. or it's either they decided, no, this is not going to fly. And unfortunately, it boomerang to the whole country. Therefore, we need also to understand that. And then also, I still want to believe, and I repeat, the arrest of former Jacob Zuma, it just sparked the whole thing. We cannot lay blame to the arrest and say because of the arrest, that is why we had this situation. We need to go down and dig and look at underneath the processes as to what exactly happened. Unfortunately, we are talking after 3 weeks after that has happened, and then we need some time to reflect on that. For now, we are also dealing with a matter that is still unfolding, and the investigations are still continuing, unfortunately. Perhaps after some few months, we can look back and say, these are the findings of what exactly transpired in a country like South Africa. Because for people to block the national roads, the writing was on the wall. Mm-hmm. For people to start burning the trucks mm-hmm. on the national roads, long before the arrest of former Jacob Zuma. Then the signs were there that something was brewing.
Well, thank you so much, Prof, for coming to the show. Looking forward to have you again in the future. Bye for now. Thank you so much, our viewers and listeners, for joining us today. Do not forget to like and follow us on all our social media platforms. We are on Facebook, we are on Instagram, we are on Twitter. And much more importantly, do not forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Till our next conversation, it is bye-bye for now. God bless you.